Well, hi everybody, it's Gail again. It's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is episode 3. I told y'all to be tuning in, huh? And I hope you are. Well, I'll tell you this. When I was growing up, we traveled all over the United States on vacation. I remember we went to Chicago to be with my Aunt Lois. She worked for the Moody Bible Institute for years and years and years. And I always wanted to be around Aunt Lois because she would always have a present for me, a gift. And it wasn't just any cheapo gifts. She had good stuff. So I really enjoyed that. I remember one time in Chicago, we'd go to Lakeshore Drive, and I saw the John Hancock building. It was so tall, 100 stories. And we went to a museum there. In fact, when I was younger, around 5th grade, I was a safety patrol kid. Got to wear the little sash and the badge and all that stuff. Well, one time, at the end of the year, they took us to Washington, D.C. That's right, from Philippi, West Virginia, where we lived at the time, to Washington, D.C. My dad was working as a librarian there at Alderson Broaddus College, which is now closed, shamefully. But anyway, we went to Washington, and I remember we went to the Washington Monument. I climbed the stairs all the way to the top, took the elevator down. I didn't want to climb the stairs down. I remember going to the United States Capitol. I think I got lost in the Capitol, but I can't remember. I remember we went to the Smithsonian Institution. I got to see the Hope Diamond, which was huge and beautiful. And I also got to see the largest elephant at that time in the world that had been stuffed. So that was my Washington, D.C. trip. Never got to visit the president, although I'm sure he would have enjoyed speaking with me. Okay, so after the 3 churches that my dad pastored, he went to work at Alderson Broaddus College in Philippi, West Virginia. And I attended the 5th and 6th grade there. So then the college was going to help my dad get a degree in library science. And to do this college sent him to Denton, Texas, at that time it was the North Texas State University. And again, we lived in some little apartments. And I remember I'd have to go to bed early, like at 9 o'clock. And my parents would stay up. My mom was helping my dad with his schoolwork, doing typing and things like that. I mentioned my dad had cerebral palsy. One thing I will tell you about him, he could drive. He learned to drive, and he learned to drive on a stick shift, H pattern of all things. But he had trouble dressing himself and walking and talking sometimes. Well, that was my dad, Omer J. Sharp. So we moved to Denton, and I was enrolled in the Denton Junior High School. And, I wasn't all that enthused about it. I had to take Texas history, where you got to draw on some maps with colored pencils and things like that. Now, one highlight from that was one class, I forget which one it was, maybe English, but they had us do a play on the radio. That's right, we got to do a play on the radio, and it was Jane Eyre, and I got the part of the main character. I think his name was Mr. Rochester. I can't remember. But I was on the radio doing that. And then there was science class. I didn't do well in science class. And that's strange, because those of you that know me know that in high school and after, I excelled in science, physical science and every kind of science there is. But this teacher, I guess we didn't like each other, and I just didn't do well in science at all. And so I remember during that time, we would make frequent trips on I-35 going down to Dallas and Fort Worth, and we would often go down there and do shopping. And I remember one night, it was a terrible, terrible thunderstorm that came up, and back then I was really scared of thunderstorms. And so what I did was I sang a song to myself in my head, you know, trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. And I sang that, and I actually survived the thunderstorm. So we were there in Denton, Texas. And I remember one time my grandparents came up to be with us. Now, my grandfather was born and raised in Leonard, Texas, which is not far from Denton, Texas. So we took him one time and my grandmother, and we went to Leonard. And I remember my dad, we stopped for lunch at a picnic table, and we used to have big cars back then, like an Oldsmobile 88 anyway, or 98. And he backed into a tree. I mean, he was mad. Mad. My mother was laughing at him. You know, backed into a tree. Then we went to one place. He loved going to swap shops and auctions and things like that. In fact, in West Virginia, I remember we went outside of Clarksburg to auctions, and you go in there and it was dim lighting, it was smoke filled, it was kind of a blue light right in the middle of the thing. They had this pot-bellied stove that glowed red right in the middle of winter, you know. So my dad liked these type of things. So we went to this swap shop there in Leonard, and he saw a wooden propeller. That's right, a wooden propeller. It was like must have been 8 foot tall, you know, and he was bound to determine he was going to get that propeller. I can't remember if he got it or not. I remember he got some of the stuff in a blue tube that was blue, and it was supposed to be a fire starter. I do remember that. So we go back to Denton, and, you know, there was a lady that took care of Elena. Now, Elena, she was born in 1965, and this was 1967, so she was about 2 years old, and I would always be helping with her, and I helped with, you know, when she was real young, with diaper pails and diaper bags and stuff like that. And I remember she was on cloth diapers with diaper pins and all of that stuff. But that's another story. Maybe some of y'all remember this type of stuff. But anyway, I remember there was a lady in Denton that babysat Elena, you know, and I remember she was an older lady, but that's our life in Denton, Texas. And I was about 12 years old. So then we moved back to Philippi, West Virginia. Now, on the way, we stopped in Kentucky, and I got to see Abraham Lincoln's birthplace. You know, he was born in Kentucky. And that's one thing about traveling all over the country. I got to see lots of stuff just everywhere, and historical stuff, and I really enjoyed that. I remember my dad would get mad if the gas station advertised price, you know, outside, and then the gas pump said a different price, and he would get really mad at those people, and I would too, you know, and something like that. So we get back to Philippi, and I'm going to be in the 5th grade, and I remember, and some of you, my West Virginia classmates might remember, My fifth grade teacher was named Mrs. True, True, you know. Seems I've got my timelines a little mixed up, don't I? Well, anyway, we got back to West Virginia from Denton, and I went from the 7th to the 8th grade in Philippi. And Philippi had a covered bridge. Now, it was 2-lane covered bridge. In fact, it was the first land battle of the Civil War was fought in Philippi, West Virginia. The town had about 2,000 people, and we went back and we lived in town at that point on Main Street. And I remember it was a big old 2-story house with a porch all the way around, and my bedroom was up on the 2nd floor, and I remember on that 2nd floor there was a big kitchen up there, and my dad had on a table he had a book stand, a book, that was made ornately, and he had this huge, it must have been 6 inches thick dictionary, a Webster's dictionary, and I always remember that. And in fact, there's a lot of memories in that house. It had a back porch, and it had a hill right behind the house. And back in those days, I'd go up in the hills and I'd find me a grapevine, and if there was a creek nearby or a river, I'd run up the hill, run down the hill on that grapevine, get over the river and let go, or splash. And then back then they had bridges that had wooden planks and ropes on the sides. So that was a lot of fun back in those days. So I went to Philippi Junior High School, 8th grade. All of a sudden I was interested in science. Now, July of 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon. And it was in that house, that big house, in a corner with a TV that we watched, black and white, Neil Armstrong step onto the surface of the moon. What a thrill. Well, a few months later, my science teacher in the 8th grade, I'd done so well, and she knew I loved space stuff so much. They brought a moon rock to our junior high school, and she took me by myself down to the auditorium when there was no one else there and let me see that displayed moon rock. Now that was a thrill. And then I had, math. I never did well in math at all. Geography, I did well in geography. So then, in the next year, the 9th grade, we moved on campus into a small little house on the Alderson Broadus campus. And that was, a house that was kind of neat. It was all white, had a big porch on the outside, had a big old pine tree right there by it. And that house, on each side of the house, it was up on a hill. There was a road on each side, and I could ride my bike up and down that road each way. Then when it snowed, I had a sled. And the sled, it had, on the sides of it, it had a piece of wood that you could go left or right with the sled. And so I would play on my sled. In the backyard of that house, they had wild strawberries. And I could go out there in the springtime and just pick strawberries and eat wild strawberries. And those were good days. The thing about school is when I went into the 9th grade, I went into a college preparatory class system. and it you had to have many more credits to get a college prep diploma. Part of my requirement was to take algebra, and in ninth grade I took algebra. Never could figure that stuff out. I mean, it was a bunch of letters and a few numbers, polynomials, monomials, and things like that. I had a hard time with that. Well, my teacher, Mr. Burdine, he still lives around Philippi, I think. He was my Sunday school teacher, and he let me get by all the way through with D's. I should have got F's because I just did not get algebra. Now, in the 10th grade, I took geometry, and I did pretty well in geometry. I got all C's, but that algebra was something else. Now, at the time, we met a preacher that lived back in the hills, and his name was J. Frank Peoples, and everyone called him Preacher. So tomorrow I'm going to talk a little bit about Preacher and the 10th grade, Philip Barber High School, and about meeting Neil Armstrong and being chased by the Secret Service when we went to see Richard Nixon. So we're going to do that tomorrow. You'll want to tune in for episode 4. I'm enjoying doing these. I hope you're enjoying hearing them. And some of y'all will remember and know exactly what I'm talking about. And so until tomorrow, I'm going to say God bless y'all richly. Y'all have a good night. Tomorrow is Friday the 13th. Don't let that get you down. And we'll see you tomorrow night. Bye-bye.